Being African will save the world. Being African will save your life. So one of the beautiful things about February, Black History Month, one of the beautiful things about the forums that you all feature here is that it creates an environment where we can come together and be ourselves. It creates an environment where we can come together in security and peace and help to restore that which was taken away, that which was stolen, that which others are working overtime to see that we never restore. So this is a precious thing that you all have here. I truly hope you all understand, and I'm sure you do. But I just want to acknowledge it, because oftentimes we don't say the things that we should say to the people we should say them to. We wait until they're dead to say, well, I should have done this, or I should have said that. Right. So we have to do it now. We have to cultivate an attitude or a consciousness where we can show our love and show our appreciation, because the things that you say have a profound impact, not just on you, but the people that you say those things to, and the people who are in your company when you express or acknowledge love and affection and appreciation for folk who look like you and me. So I want to do a couple of things this evening. I want to talk a little bit about history, but I want to spend the bulk of my time talking about the practical application of history. Because what I realized about 2.5 years ago, when there was a very brief period where I was ill and hospitalized. I don't get ill, but for a brief period in 2005, I was ill. And as I was dealing with that illness and the restoration of my health, it dawned on me that, I love history. I love to travel, I love to lecture, I love to learn, I love to read, but all of that means nothing if you don't have your health. Amen. And so, in my career as a speaker, I've seen so many wonderful scholars leave us and become ancestors. Amen. And that of many of the scholars who have left us, they left well before their time. And there were several contributing factors to them becoming ancestors. One had to do with, just ignoring your health, like we all do. I'll walk tomorrow, I'll exercise tomorrow, or I'll go on that diet later on. We keep putting off those things that we should be doing. And then the other factor is that it's very difficult, it's very challenging to work with our people. Our folk will wear you out. Stress will take you out of here. And so, it's so critically important. And I said I wanted to start doing this more often now. As I talk about history, I also need to start talking about health. We need to take better care of ourselves. Because it's a shame. Last month I was speaking at a presentation at the Justice Department, Martin Luther King celebration. And I made reference to the fact that we're worse off now than we were 40 years ago. We are worse off now in practically every area of life. We've got more black folk in jail now than ever before. We've got more black folk who are suffering from hypertension and diabetes and prostate cancer. So when we thought that we were integrating into the larger American society, we didn't realize that these acts were going to result in the deterioration of our health. So it means to me that we've got to begin to pay more attention to those little things that will ensure our survival. Washington, D.C., I've been living in Washington, D.C. now for the last 38, 39 years. And the unique thing about Washington, D.C. is that Washington, D.C., within a 50-mile radius of Washington, D.C., you have the highest concentration of wealth and education in the hands and minds of black folk, the largest concentration within a 50-mile radius of Washington, D.C. than anywhere else on the planet. And with all of that education we got in D.C., we don't own anything. With all that money that flows through the hands of black folk in D.C., there are very few businesses that are owned by African Americans in the D.C. area. Washington, D.C. has the highest incidence of prostate cancer on the planet. Washington, D.C. has the highest incidence of infant mortality in the United States of America. Washington, D.C. has the highest incidence of AIDS and HIV in America. So don't be fooled. Just because you're close to the seat of power, just because you're in the capital of the most concentrated sources of information on the planet, doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to apply that knowledge in your personal life. Doesn't mean anything if you're making good money if you don't know how to utilize that money to acquire wealth. Wealth. And wealth is determined not by what you spend, but by what you pass on to your descendants when you expire. See, all these material things that we acquire, these cars, and these fancy shoes and clothes, all that stuff means nothing because it's not generating wealth. So it's important that we begin to talk about some other things so we can begin to see the greater dynamics of the world in which we live and make the most out of the time that we have here on the planet. I've been studying and researching and talking about African history and culture for more than 25 years. I've written a number of books about history. I've traveled to Egypt this past summer with my 40th trip to Egypt, made over 50 trips to Africa. And what I'm really beginning to understand now, I'll be 57 this year, and what I'm really beginning to understand now as I look back on my life, specifically when I first started doing the things that I'm doing back in the mid-70s. And I remember it was 87, I had a conversation with John Jackson. I guess John Jackson is a step below John Henry Clark in terms of people that I adore. Right? John Jackson was one of the most brilliant minds that I ever had the opportunity to engage in conversation. Incredible man, incredible mind. And we talked, my first telephone conversation, we talked for about 2 hours. And this brother talked about life in South Carolina. He talked about when he came to Harlem and all the things that he did in New York, all the people that he met in New York. And he talked about these events as if they just happened yesterday. Man had a perfect memory. And as he talked about his life and his career, this brother confided in me. And this was crucial because I was just beginning to make some decisions to do the things that I've been doing for the last 20-some odd years. And I'm picking his brain for ideas, for inspiration. And the thing that stuck with me was when Dr. Jackson said, and he was late 70s at the time, late 70s, living in a one-room apartment in the south side of Chicago. This brother told me that if he had to do it all over again, he would pass for white. He wouldn't do it. And so I had to scratch my head and say, wait a minute now. Here's somebody that I adore, and he's telling me that if he had to do it all over again, he would. So I had to stop for a second and reconsider what it was that I wanted to do. And one of the things that I realized that made him so angry and bitter was that many of his writings, John Jackson's, my favorite book of John Jackson is Introduction to African Civilization. It's one of the most powerful books I've ever read. And the introduction to that book was written by John Henry Clark. And I remember reading that book in 1980 when I was flying to California, reading it on the plane. And I'm reading the introduction, and I said, if the rest of the book is as good as the introduction, this is going to be a fantastic piece of material literature to consume. But I love that book, and one of the things that I found in talking with both Jackson and Clark was that they expressed their displeasure at the number of times that they were ripped off by publishers. They poured their heart and soul into researching the history and culture, writing the books, and then turning the manuscript over to specific different publishing houses, only to find out 4 or 5 years down the road that they're not receiving their royalties. And so one of the decisions that I made in talking to Brother Jackson that afternoon was that I'm going to have to assume responsibility for publishing my own work, to make sure that I'm not in the same position that he's in 40 years from now. So we have to learn from the life experiences of others, because our life is too short to learn from our own mistakes. So the beautiful thing of history is that, history really embodies the whole concept of Sankofa, going back and studying what happened before you first walked on the planet, studying the successes and the failures, analyzing that information so that you can make decisions as to how you're going to negotiate this thing called life. And I found that the further back you can look and study, the more data you can accumulate, and the better your opportunity is to plan for your future. I remember, since this is Black History Month, I want to just spend a little bit of time talking about history before I jump into what I really want to talk about. I remember growing up in Chicago, I really wasn't exposed to a lot of Black history. And actually going to Howard University, I wasn't exposed to Black history. But I recall a high school principal of mine, high school teacher, who used to begin each class with the statement that to not know what happened before one was born is to always remain a child. So he would proceed to talk about history so that we could mature mentally and go through life with a clear understanding of where we have been, where we are, and where we're going. Unfortunately, this teacher is the same teacher who told me that Black people had no history prior to slavery. Now, I don't believe this man, this white guy, I don't believe that he was a racist. I believe that he was a product of his environment. And that the reality is we only know what we know. So if you have been fed misinformation, then that's all you're capable of repeating. But that statement that Black people had no history prior to our enslavement really didn't sit well with me. It didn't resonate with my person. And it prompted me to begin to find out who we were and what we've done. And as I've been engaged in that search and that quest to know who I was, I've come to the understanding that to not know who you were before your ancestors were enslaved is to always remain a slave. And so we study the history of African people that precedes the history that precedes their enslavement, so that we can better determine what it is we're going to do with our lives. Dr. Clark told us on numerous occasions that history is the clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. He said that history is the compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. So if history is the clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day, I have to ask the question, do you know what time it is? If history is the compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography, do you know where you are? Do you know how you got where you are? And more importantly, do you know where you are going tomorrow? And do you have a clear vision in your mind as to how you can get there? So history is more than just names and dates and facts. History can save your life if you approach the subject matter from the right perspective. It tells you not only what to do, it tells you what not to do. You know, if the history of African people were a book of 1,000 pages, then the story of our enslavement would begin on page 997 and would only be 2 pages long. So for us to be fixated just on what happened during the Ma'afa means that we are missing out on a wealth of knowledge that can empower us to begin to do things and conceive things that we never thought possible. I like to, this microphone stretch a bit. I want to just share with you this, this product that a colleague of mine in the UK is developing. Okay. And, okay, I want to share with you this timeline that a colleague of mine has developed in the UK. And actually, I'm leaving tomorrow to go to England. And I plan on bringing some of these back with me. It's too loud?
I can talk a little softly.
I turn the mic down. Can I have about 5 people to come up here and give me a hand? 5 folks come up here. Young lady, you come up here and help. Yes, you can. Now, if you can hold this and stand behind me and hold this, I want you all to spread this out. As many people as it takes, unfold this. This is a visual timeline of 8,000 years of history. My colleague in the UK, who was a history teacher, found that as he was teaching his students, they had a very difficult time understanding some of the concepts. They had a very difficult time putting history into perspective. So he developed this timeline, and this is a small version. He's got a larger version, which I hope to bring back with me. But it begins at 5200 BCE and goes all the way to 3000 ACE. So he talks about what happened in the past. He talks about where we are right now in 2007 and how standing at this point in time in history, if we are able to gain perspective of all of this knowledge and information, we can apply that knowledge in our lives and better determine where we're going to go the next 1,500 years. That's the power of history. That's the beauty of history. And so when you look at certain segments of this timeline, it shows you the beginning of culture and civilization and science and mathematics and chemistry. It shows you the historical and the political and the cultural framework that was developed in chemistry. 4000 BCE, Africans had already developed concepts of God, architecture, engineering, science, and philosophy. Shows you here with the building of creation of Haramakheb, the so-called Sphinx, the building of the pyramids. It shows you the African personality, the kings and queens who are responsible for making great contributions to culture and civilization. All of this is our history. The first European doesn't come on the scene until right around here, right here, right here. All of this is us. So knowing that puts you mentally in a different frame of mind. So here is where Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, the first piece of European literature. Africans had already built the pyramids, already had studied the stars, the planets, and built great temples so that they can advance their knowledge. Now, the crucial point is that here, give me a second, let me find it. This period right in, give me 1 second. You have a book on the history of the U.S.? Give me a second to find it because it begins, oh, okay, right here, all right? Right in here is the period, I'm sorry, it's right here. This period right here, from here to here, is a period of slavery. The Ma'afa, the Middle Passage. Just a small period in time. All of this is what we can draw upon. All of this is what we can use right now to determine the next 1,000 years, the next 1,500 years. Wow. So the beautiful thing about Black History Month is that it gives us an opportunity to study our past. But brothers and sisters, I want to encourage you all to understand very clearly that we have to move beyond the Ma'afa. And that today, in this particular point in time, we can't continue to obsess over the Mafia. Now, the Mafia was terrible. I'm not trying to minimize it at all. But mentally, if you stay there, you will never be able to tap into the unlimited wealth that is still here waiting for you to unearth, waiting for you to incorporate into your life. And understand this. This period of time means that there are literally millions and millions and millions of ancestors who are waiting for you to call on them, who have knowledge, who have traditions to pass on to us. And if we're just stuck right here, we're never able to access all of this wealth that's waiting for us. So I just want to give you all this visual understanding, this visual overview of how we need to be focusing our attention in order for us to create the world that we want our children to inherit. So if you all can roll that up, I'd appreciate it. I'll have, by the end of this month, I'll have copies of this timeline, so you all can go to my website and we can make arrangements to ship them down to you.
Coming down next month.
Pardon me?
Coming down to see you next month.
Okay, so you are coming down in April.
April
19th. April, right. We'll have some when you come down in April. But we'll also have some other new things for you as well. We're always striving to improve what we do because you can't keep doing the same thing and call yourself progressive. The beautiful thing about life is that life demands that we evolve. It demands that we change. It demands that we improve. And as I stated earlier, one of the situations that we find ourselves in now as African people is that if we are honest with ourselves, we will say, if we're honest with ourselves, we'll say that we have regressed over the last 40 years. We have regressed. So let's be honest. And let's understand the events which have led to our regression. Let's understand the mistakes that we have made. And then let's make a concerted effort to stop thinking and acting like that tomorrow. See, the beautiful thing is that once you begin to understand the power of consciousness or the power of your mind, you begin to realize that it's not races who determine your reality. I mean, they're here, and we know that, but there's a power far greater than races. There's a power far greater than these white supremacists who want to keep you suppressed. And that power is power that you have, that we all have. That is the power that exists within our consciousness. As Dr. Carnegie Woodson said, if you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about their actions. If you control their consciousness, you don't have to worry about them ever defeating you. You don't ever have to worry about them changing their financial relationship with you. Because they will stay stuck in time and be forever your slaves. We're in New York, and one of the thoughts that automatically comes to our mind when we talk about New York is September 11th, 2001. And if we are very clear about the history of the United States of America, then we know that Americans have historically killed their own in order to implement programs of profound change in government. So I want to just put something in context for you with regards to September 11, 2001. They stated that a little less than 3,000 people died when the planes crashed into the World Trade Center, the plane crashed into the Pentagon, and that fourth plane crashed in the field in rural Pennsylvania. About 3,000, almost 3,000 people died. And the very first thing this government said is that we need to find out who committed this atrocity.
Like they didn't know.
Hunt them down, and then they declared war against them. So let me put something in perspective for you. What happened to African people during the Ma'afa, during the 444 years of the Ma'afa, from 1444 to 1888, conservatively speaking, over 50 million African men, women, and children died. That is the equivalent of September the 11th happening every day for 44 years and 8 months. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves is, who is responsible for perpetrating those deaths? Have we identified those people? And if we have, then what are we going to do to ensure that that process does not continue? See, it puts the onus on us. Because once we begin to understand very clearly how we got into the circumstances that we find ourselves in, then we can determine how we're going to change that relationship so that we can determine what our future is going to be, so that we can determine what the future of our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren is going to be. And so the reality is, if we aren't thinking on that level, if we aren't thinking 7 generations into the future, 150 years, we're not thinking. Everything that we think, say, and do, every moment of our lives determines the quality of life for the next 150 years. That's power. That is too much power to leave in the hands of BET. That is too much power to leave in the hands of institutions that have demonstrated that they don't have your best interest at heart. So it doesn't do a whole lot of good to complain about people who don't mean you any good. All you need to do is to change your mindset, change your reality, and you change everything else around you. Now, there's some points I want to talk about this evening. I'm sorry I don't have a whole lot of time to go over more things because I've got a train to catch to get back home and prepare to go to London tomorrow. But let me just share some basic things with you. Any of you are familiar with Star Trek?
Yeah.
Guys, well, you don't have to be a Trekkie to like Star Trek. It's good science fiction. And the science fiction actually is social commentary under the guise of science fiction. You see, because one of the interesting aspects of the human mind is that it's very difficult for people to relate to things in a contemporary context. And so in order to increase one's understanding of a subject matter, you've got to separate them from the present moment. So before I talk about Star Trek, let me talk about Star Wars for a minute. How many of you are familiar with Star Wars?
Yeah, what's that do?
All right. What is the beginning of every Star Wars movie? How does every Star Wars movie begin?
Big giant letters.
Big giant letters to say what?
They say, once upon a time in a galaxy far away.
All right. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Now, George Lucas created the Star Wars story because 1977, he felt that the spirit of America was depressed, coming out of all of the turmoil, political turmoil from Watergate. People distrusted government, didn't believe in the people that we're supposed to put our confidence in. And that what he wanted to do with Star Wars was to create a new mythology for a new generation of Americans. Now what's interesting about George Lucas is that he didn't start off college as a filmmaker. He started off as a philosophy major. And as a freshman in college, he read the works of Joseph Campbell. If you aren't familiar with Joseph Campbell, I need to introduce yourself to Joseph Campbell. He's probably one of the most spiritual Europeans I've ever had the opportunity to read. He did this series called The Power of Myth that's on DVD and well worth renting and watching. There's also a companion book, The Power of Myth. And when George Lucas began to read Joseph Campbell's works about mythology and the power of it, he realized that he could have a greater impact on the world as a filmmaker than as someone who majored in philosophy, because films allow you to reach millions of people in a matter of minutes and plant thoughts in their consciousness. So what George Lucas did in the Star Wars trilogy was to tell the story of ancient Kemet. The story of Asar, Aset, and Heru is the fundamental essence of the story of Star Wars. So if you look at it and if you break it down, you see that it's all there. Just presented in a contemporary context. But in order to make your mind receptive to the story, he had to disconnect your conscious mind from the present moment. And he did that with the words that you saw in every Star Wars movie. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. So he's telling you that the story about these spaceships and robots is not happening in the future, it happened in the past, a long time ago, in a place far, far away. So he used a technique called disassociation to separate your mind from your body so that you would be more receptive to the information that he's going to plant in your consciousness. Because he understood that this whole thing is about consciousness. Whoever plants the seeds of thought in your consciousness will be able to determine the trajectory of your life. And so Star Trek was such a significant television series because Gene Roddenberry, the producer of Star Trek, dealt with social issues in the 1960s in a science fiction format. So he gave you the impression that he was dealing with issues in the future, but he was talking about things that were happening right now. But the opening line of Star Trek films, Star Trek television programs, goes with the statement that space is the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Star Trek Enterprise, and its mission is to seek out new life, new civilization, to boldly go where no one has gone before. But if we examine reality from a contemporary framework, based on the research of scientists and neurologists, they now know that outer space is not the final frontier. They understand very clearly that the final frontier is inner space. The final frontier is the mind. And with a properly conditioned mind, you will come to understand that you are the master of this starship. And under your command, this body, this ship can take you wherever you want to go. And so if you look at the latest scientific research being done by astrophysicists, physicists, they come to basically the same conclusion. Astrophysicists, those people who study the cosmos, stars and planets and galaxies and the Milky Way, they have acknowledged within the last decade or so that 93% of space is empty. But it's not really empty. It is filled with this substance which they refer to as dark matter. They call it dark matter because they have not been able to define its essence. But they know that it is everywhere and it affects everything. Now, we have physicists who are studying subatomic particles. And as they study subatomic particles with electron microscopes and look into the basic atomic structure of atoms, electrons, neutrons, and protons. We all know from science atoms are comprised of electrons, neutrons, and protons. Well, atoms are just like the universe. 93% of atoms is empty space. And that empty space on a subatomic level is also referred to as dark matter. And what these physicists have discovered when they are trying to identify these subatomic particles of dark matter, that they only appear when they think about them. Huh? They only appear, they only become visible when they mentally conceive them. And so what they have begun to understand that it is the mind, it is consciousness which determines your reality on a subatomic level. This is powerful stuff. But what I want you all to understand that this powerful stuff that these scientists today are discovering is not really a discovery. It is a rediscovery of principles, concepts, and ideas that were understood in Kemet thousands of years earlier. And so, what all of this means, Dr. Clark used to always say that all history is a current event. All history is a current event. And so if we analyze the current interpretation of history and put it into context with what we understand happened in the past, we will begin to merge these two forms of awareness into one that will allow us to be able to perceive what tomorrow is going to be. So let me give you this a philosophical construct that will help you better determine your tomorrow. There is this understanding that there are known knowns. There are things that we know we know. But we also understand that there are known unknowns. Things that we don't know that we know we don't know. And along this same train of thought, there also exists unknown unknowns. The things that we don't know, that we don't even know, we don't know. All right? So let me give you a metaphor to illustrate this train of thought, because I want you all to stay with me now. I want you all to follow me. If the totality of knowledge, what human beings know, the known knowns, could be condensed into a material form, say water. If the essence of what we know as human beings could be condensed into water, that water would fill a thimble. Those are the known knowns. The things that we know would fill a thimble. The known unknowns would be like taking that thimble full of knowledge and pouring it into an 8-ounce glass of water. The unknown unknowns, the things that we don't know and don't know that we don't know, would be like taking that 8-ounce glass of water and pouring it into the ocean. So I want you to understand, brothers and sisters, where we are at this specific point in time in history. We are standing on the verge of a profound transformation of consciousness that's going to make the flat earth theory of 1491 look as irrelevant as George Bush 2 years from now. All right? So it's important for us to begin to prepare ourselves for what is coming. And the best time to prepare for that is now. You don't wait until you're in the middle of something to start doing what you should have done a minute ago, a year ago, or a lifetime ago. What scientists are beginning to discover, what scientists are beginning to acknowledge, is that their perception of the world is extremely limited. You know, there's a saying, Missouri is called the show me state.
Right.
And there's a saying that, I'll see it, I'll believe it when I see it. And that's based on the false reality that seeing is believing. Seeing is believing. Now, if you buy into that construct, then it means that you're going to be incorrect 90% of the time. If what you see determines your reality, you're going to be wrong 90% of the time. Why is that? Well, we see because of the visible light spectrum, which is a very tiny part of the total energy spectrum, but the visible light spectrum operates because light waves bounce off of an object, and that reflection travels through the air into your eyes, along your optic nerve, which then sends electrical impulses into your brain, and then formulates what it is you see. You hear only because my vocal cords are vibrating, and the air is rushing up through my larynx, causing my vocal cords to vibrate, and that vibration is being emitted into the air, and it's traveling through the air in this room. You are picking it up through your ears, and it's traveling through your auditory canal, causing your eardrum to vibrate, which then sends electrical signals into your brain and converts what I'm saying into words that you understand. So if we rely on our physical senses, our eyes and our ear and our hearing to determine our reality, we're going to be wrong 90% of the time. So I'm saying that to say that there are other ways of knowing. There are other aspects of our life, our reality, that we have never been introduced to. We think, or we've been taught to believe, that we have 5 basic senses. Well, in reality, we probably have more than 25. We have more than 25. You know, there's a saying that, you know, the average person uses less than 5% of their brain, which is true. We use 5% or less of our brain because that is how we have been conditioned to function. And the average person is comfortable with that degree of dysfunctionality. Now imagine you owning a business, you're a businessman, you're a businesswoman, and your employees only come to work 5% of the time. How long are you going to stay in business? So how can we expect to negotiate life if we're only using 5% of our total abilities? So that little reality means that we've got to begin to step up and do more. We have to expect more of ourselves as individuals, before we can begin to expect more from others. Because all the things that I'm talking about begin with self first. Once you get yourself together, then you can justifiably tell other folk what they should be doing. But if yourself ain't together, you need to shut up. Once you get yourself together, even if you don't feel like instructing others, then they can know what to do just by observing you, watching your movements, watching how you interact with others. And let me say this because it needs to be said, and especially because we have so many children here in the room. Children are our greatest resource. And we do our children a disservice if we don't share this type of information with them, so that they can begin to understand that there is a greater potential that lies dormant within them, that needs to be cultivated. I mentioned earlier that I've been to Egypt 40 times. And, you know, traveling, one of the beautiful things about traveling there year after year is that you begin to, well, the first 2 trips, I got over tripping over being in Egypt.
Yeah, I know.
You know, because it's great to want to go to Kemet and see the magnificent temples and pyramids and tombs and the great works that our ancestors created. It is wonderful to go there and say that this is what we did when we were in charge. But the reality is, after you've been there 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, you get over that great excitement, because you realize that Kemet is dead, that it's gone, and that the Arabs who control Egypt right now lay claim to all of that. And let me be honest with you all, we ain't never getting it back. We ain't never getting it back. But the important reality is We don't have to get that back. All we need to do is to recreate the consciousness that will allow us to recreate that wherever we are. Because the beauty of it is, the realization that I came to probably, I don't know, it may have been 10th, 11th, 12th trip. We had a group when we were going through Karnak Temple, Temple of Karnak. Temple of Karnak is the grandest structure ever created by human beings on earth. It is a temple complex that is so large, you can take every church built in London, England, put them inside of that temple, and still have room for 2 football fields. It's huge. It's incredible. And that at the height of this temple's operation, they had over 30,000 people functioning within this temple. But when you go there now, all you are able to see are the ruins of that temple. So I stood in the hypostyle hall near the entrance of the temple, and I saw the state that this structure was in. And I allowed myself to mentally travel back in time and imagine what this institution looked like when it was brand new, when it was at the height of its glory. Because the glorious thing that you see in that temple is that there's meta nature everywhere. And every square inch of that temple, all the columns and everything, is covered with meta nature and symbols and sculptures of the Neteru and kings and other significant personalities. And all of those carvings were painted. So it was almost as if this building, this structure was alive. And it spoke to you on multiple levels simultaneously. And as I began to allow myself to imagine what this great institution looked like when it was new, what came into my awareness was the fact that we today, so-called modern man, is really subhuman. We function on a subhuman level. We don't even know what it means to be human. When you see these structures that were created thousands of years ago, you begin to understand that these men and women who created and who maintained this nation and these institutions were folk who knew what it meant to be human. And the word human is significant because human is a Sanskrit word, comes from the Sanskrit word hue and man. The word man means mind, the word hue means God. So essentially, you're looking at the works of individuals who were literally God-minded beings, who understood what to do in order to manifest the consciousness of God within their consciousness so that they could build for eternity, so that they could create structures thousands of years ago that mankind today, with all of its technological accomplishments, cannot replicate. So we have available to us, sisters and brothers, that same consciousness. There is a carving in the tomb of Ramesses IV in the Valley of the Kings. It's a carving that speaks to this very basic and fundamental reality. It's a carving in which you have 13 images, 13 figures of men standing, and the carving wraps around the wall. And the first figure is standing, and you see 2 ropes coming out of his navel. 2 strings or 2 cords coming out from his navel. And then there's a series of 12 individuals spaced around the wall who have their hands out, and they are holding each of these 2 cords that came from this one individual's body. And so they pass from one person to another, to another, to another, to another, and they stretch all the way around the wall till you get to the 14th image, which is the image of the king Ramesses IV, and he's holding the 2 ends of the rope in his hand. Now, it took me a while to really get an understanding of what that was. And what it depicts on two levels. What it depicts is the helical nature of the DNA in our bodies. That is the oldest representation of DNA known to man. And so it is seen being passed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And here's the king holding the genetic material of his ancestors, going back hundreds and hundreds of years. What that speaks to is that next phase of human development that we are literally standing on the threshold of right now. And that is this profound transformation of consciousness. Psychiatrists are just now beginning to acknowledge something that they discovered in the 30s and 40s and were afraid to really wrap their minds around. But they're beginning to publicly acknowledge now that there is such a thing called ancestral memory, genetic memory. If you think about it, when you clone something, you take a gene from an animal or plant, and within that gene is all of the genetic material necessary to make another one of whatever that thing was, to replicate it. And so by cloning that thing, you can create 2, 3, 400 of that same thing. They are identical. So within that tiny subatomic particle, known as a gene, is everything that was ever known about that entire structure. So that if you can clone another person or another object by taking a gene, then it also means that the thing that you have cloned has all of the memories of that thing. That means that every person in this room, is walking around in your body 24/7, all of the memories of every single one of your ancestors. We carry them around with us everywhere we go. And so the key is accessing that ancestral memory. Those people in our society who have been able to do that to a limited degree are individuals who, instead of using 5% of their brain, they use 10. They use 15%. And compared to our 5, they are extraordinary individuals. They are the Imhoteps of the world. They are the Michael Jordans of the world. But it is a potential that every single person possesses. So the issue is, the challenge is, what can we begin to do to activate that dormant consciousness, to tap into those ancestral voices that are waiting for us to come into our correct mind so that you can become the conduit through which they will speak and continue their lives. Because they live in us. We are our ancestors. And when we know that, when we understand that, then that understanding will direct every single thing that you do. It changes your behavior. It changes the tone of your conversation. It changes your choice of words. When your consciousness is changed, it makes it real difficult to watch television. Because you see how foolish it is. You realize how much of an enormous waste of time it is. And you also begin to understand that television is nothing more than electronic crack. It is a drug. It is a drug that is designed. It is a drug that is designed to cast a hypnotic spell. It captivates you. with light and sound. And it speaks to a certain part of your consciousness and disengages you from reality. That's why, for the most part, television is free. And we know in America, ain't nothing free in America. You pay for television because of the commercials. And the people who produce commercials understand the power of the subconscious mind. They know that when you were watching television, you submit your will to that box, to that one-eyed monster. And so those commercials are designed to plant seeds in your subconscious mind. So that at the proper moment, those seeds will plant, those seeds will sprout, and then cause you to do what that commercial programmed you to do. Super Bowl was a couple of weeks ago, right?
Right.
And New York is excited about the fact that your team won the Super Bowl. But I want you all to understand that the Super Bowl is the most watched program on television.
Right.
And that the commercial time for the Super Bowl is the most expensive time on television. I didn't check the stats for this year, but I know last year it cost something like $2.5 million per 30 seconds. All right? Now, if somebody's going to spend $2.5 million to buy 30 seconds of airtime, or if they're going to decide to buy, say, 3-4 minutes of airtime and run 4 one-minute commercials, they're investing a serious amount of money.
That's right. What was it?
Because you not only have to buy the commercial time, but you also have to manufacture the commercial.
Yeah.
So they're investing tens of millions of dollars, but they know with crystal clarity that they will, if their commercial is effective, they will make that money back in less than a week.
Right. Right.
1984, this little company called Apple aired a commercial for their Macintosh computers. It only ran one time. And within a week, they sold over 200,000 Macintosh computers. They understand the power of the mind. They understand how to plant suggestions in your mind in order to have you do things that you would not normally do. Okay, is this on? No? Okay, so I want to share a couple of things with you that illustrate some of the concepts and ideas that I'm talking about so that we can begin to see and better understand the nature of the world in which we live and make better choices about how we live our lives. Because as I said earlier, I've come to understand very clearly that my life is not determined by who's in the White House. My life is not determined by races. My life is determined by me. My life is determined by what I think, by what I say, and what I do. Let me say this before I go on. I was talking about speech. The power of speech is so significant that we cannot afford to take it for granted. In Kemet, the writing form that the Greeks called hieroglyphics was known as Medu Neter. Medu Neter means the words of God, or the words of the Creator. When it was written, it represented the writing of the Creator. It was divine speech, divine script. When you write Medu Neter is only written with the consonants. You never write the vowels. You only wrote consonants and not the vowels. Why? Why? Because vowels, A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, vibrate at a rate 600 times faster than consonants. Our tongue does not obstruct the power or the flow of the words that comes out of our mouth. So A, E, I, O, U do not inhibit the flow of air or spirit coming out of your body. So they vibrate faster and they have power. So Medu Neter, in order to preserve this knowledge and to prevent it from falling into the hands of improperly trained people, they wrote information out but without the keys, and the vowels are the keys. which unlock the power in the language. So they can put this information out there without worrying about someone misusing it or abusing it. So in that context, once you understand the power of words, and more specifically, once you understand the power of your words, because we bring things into existence via the word. We impact matter and spirit with our words. You can make a sister feel like a queen just by looking in the eyes and saying. So in that context, once you understand the power of words, and more specifically, once you understand the power of your words, because we bring things into existence via the word. We impact matter and spirit with our words. You can make a sister feel like a queen just by looking in the eyes and saying, honey, I love you. Or you can make her feel like something less than a queen when you. It all depends on how you use the words that come out of your mouth. I say this to say that one of the many problems that affects our lives that we have direct control over is how we use our speech. Say that to say that anytime you use profanity, anytime you curse, anytime you swear, you are projecting out into your environment negative energy, which changes the dynamic of everything around you. It changes the air around you, changes the energy around you, changes the consciousness around you. You call profanity cursing, right? What is a curse? Curse is a negative, evil spell that is cast, that is spoken and cast on someone. The word profanity comes from the Latin words pro and fama. The word pro means before or outside. The word fama means temple. So within the human anatomy, there's a part of our body that's like right here that we call our temple. And if you project a line from this point here and from the center of your skull, where those two lines intersect, is where your pineal gland is located. And your pineal gland is your direct line of communication to the Creator and to the ancestors. Within the temples of ancient Kemet, the most sacred part of the temples, the oldest part, the most sacred part of every temple is the Holy of Holies. It was that part of the temple where it was known that the spirit of a nature or a specific aspect of the Creator would dwell within that sacred space. And since we come to understand that the architectural structure of the temples in ancient Kemet was fashioned on the anatomy of human beings, then the Holy of Holies corresponds to the pineal gland within your brain. That is where the spirit of the Creator, God, Allah, Jehovah, whatever term you want to use to define this undefinable source, that's where it exists. And so within that context, this part of your skull is called your temple, because that is where spirit dwells. So anytime you use profanity outside of the temple, you are literally out of your mind. You are outside of a sacred environment, and you are dwelling in Ispet. Ispet was the Kemetic concept that represented evil, death, destruction, poverty, illness. You can either dwell with a close and harmonious relationship with the Creator, or function outside of that relationship simply by the choice of words that you use. That's something that we all have control over. You determine how you express yourself. And one of the worst things that could have ever happened to African people is for us to use profanity like it's nothing, like it's insignificant. We see it in the music, we see it and hear it in the music, and anytime those words are spoken, they are emitted into the environment, they are internalized by you, and they affect every cell in your body.
We wonder why we
So to be honest with you, the white man can disappear from the planet tomorrow. And as long as we continue doing the things that we've been doing the last 25, 30 years, we will never be able to achieve the things that we have capacity to achieve. So it's all about knowing yourself. It's all about mastering yourself. And then begin to do the things that you've always had the capacity to do. That is to be an instrument through which the ancestors may do their work. So I just want to share a couple of things with you, a couple of demonstrations with you that represent this new threshold of consciousness that we are standing on right now, that we are on the verge of becoming, incorporating into our lives to a much greater extent. Let me see how we're going to do this. Okay. I always like to move beyond just talking about history and showing the practical application of these things and how they impact us. Brother, can I ask you to come up here for a second? Oh, sure. That illustrates the potential that exists within us as human beings. It illustrates how precious our bodies are and how we must begin to do a better job of managing the house that holds our spirit. What's your name, brother? Keith. Keith, all right, nice to meet you. Keith, are you left hand or the right hand? Right hand. Can you stand and face the audience and stick out your right arm? Make a fist, stick out your right arm. We're going to do a simple muscle test. I want to demonstrate how I can affect this brother's physical state of being through light and sound. All right? So I just want to do a simple test. I'm going to push down on your arm, and I want you to resist me pushing your arm down, okay? Just, all right, pretty good muscle strength. All right. So now, brother, I want you to stare at, I'm going to put the microphone down for a minute because I need two hands. Put your hand back up. I want you to stare at this card for a few minutes and resist me pushing your arm down. Okay, cool. Now, I want you to stare at this for a few minutes. Resist me pushing your arm down. I don't know. What color was it? Good. That's the question you should be asking. What color was it? Pink. Pink. All right? The color pink makes you physically weak. The color pink makes you physically weak. Come on up, I'm not finished. The color pink makes you physically weak. Remember I said we see because light bounces off of an object, travels into our eye along our optic nerve, which then sends a signal into our brain. What the color pink does is to disrupt the flow of this electrical current. It causes it to short circuit. And so what it does is makes you physically weak. It disconnects the relationship between your brain and your muscles, and it makes you physically weak. Maybe, no, hold on now. I want you all to follow. Don't get caught up on the visuals now. I want you all to understand what I'm sharing with you all. All right, let me do it one more time since you want to see it. All right. Brother, you come on up here with the green. Let me do it to you. Come on up here. Stand. Calm down. Left hand and right handed. Right, stick right hand out. All right. I'm not even going to do the white. I'll just start on with the pink. Oh, come on, that was too easy. That was too easy.
I can do it.
All right, but the point that I'm making is the color pinks makes everyone physically weak. Maybe that's the reason why when you get fired from your job, they give you a pink slip. Add insult to injury. Maybe that's the reason why when a child is born, if it's a male child, they put a blue cap on his head. If it's a female child, they put what? A pink ribbon, and they'll call women the weaker sex. See, folk know what you don't know. And they use your lack of knowledge against you. Against you. So, now that I've demonstrated that the color pink visually watching or looking at the color pink makes you physically weak, I'm going to show you how you can override that. All right? No. Stick your arm out and hold this. Okay? My stuff here. And all these pockets. Okay. No, don't close your eyes. That'd be cheap. Okay, now watch this. What happened?
More resistance.
All right, now tell me what you saw. You take it down. Tell me what you saw. All right. He was able to keep his arm up, resist me pushing it down, as long as I made that sound. Correct? And as soon as I stopped making that sound, his arm went down. Thank you, brother. His arm went down. So, what questions should you all be asking me right now? Huh? Yes, ma'am. What questions should you be asking me?
Why does the color pink make everybody weak?
Oh, well, I already talked about that. You can ask your sister to explain it to you. Yes, sir.
Is hearing stronger than the sight?
Not necessarily stronger. See, the question that you all remember, I remember Asa Hilliard saying something in 1981 that stayed with me for the rest of my life. If you never ask the right question, you never get the right answer. All right? The question that you all should ask me is, what note did I play? What note did I play? Anybody in here love music? All right, so what note is this? C. Middle C. All right, now, this is the key. There are 7 notes in the musical scale. There are 7 colors in the light spectrum. Every color in the light spectrum corresponds to a note in the musical scale. So the C note corresponds to the color red. And red is a color which gives you power and energy. So what I did was, I demonstrated how the color pink short circuits your muscular system and makes you weak. And I showed you how by just using sound vibration, I could emit a sound that came into that brother's body and gave him the strength in order to overcome the debilitating effects of the color pink. All I'm dealing with is light and sound. What do you think television is? What do you think radio is? You are internalizing energy every day of your life. What kind of energy are you internalizing? Is that energy helping you to be healthy, strong, prosperous, clear of thought? Or is it confusing you, disconnecting you from the ability to communicate with those ancestors who are waiting for you to come back into your right mind so that they can continue building for eternity? See, this is where we are right now. This is a marvelous time to be alive.
Amen.
Because we have access to more information now than any point in time in history. And that's good and bad. I sometimes refer to the internet as the information stupid highway because there's so much misinformation on the internet. And if you don't know how to discern truth from falsehood or partial falsehood, you could be in worse shape than if you knew nothing.
Right.
So there's a process, or there are processes for cultivating a higher level of consciousness. Let's just, I'm here, let me do, I got 15 more minutes. Let me do a couple more things before I got to go. I'm sorry I got to run. So that means you all have to bring me back
Yeah.
when I got time to deal with some of these things. emphasizing more is that history is good, but we need to start focusing on the practical application of knowledge. It doesn't do us any good to talk about the past if we're living in hell right now. We need to begin to incorporate into our lives concrete ways that we can make tomorrow better, and the day after tomorrow better than today. If we can't do that, we're just wasting air. We're wasting time. I've got another little gadget. Those of you who maybe read Second Volume of Browder Survival Strategies, I wrote about this in the book. But this is a little device that to me demonstrates this concept that I refer to as cultural economics. Managing the house that holds your spirit. That's what economics really boils down to. This body is the vessel through which the ancestors and the Creator works. And you must be able to manage the income of this body. By income, I mean income literally. You must manage everything that comes into this body. You must manage what you see, what comes in through your eyes. You must manage what comes into your ears, what you hear. You must manage what comes into your mouth, what you eat, what you drink. Everything that comes into this body affects every aspect of your life. So you can't afford to take this stuff for granted. You can't just say, well, television is just a television, and turn it on and let your children be exposed to this pornography and trash 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and then get mad at them when they start acting out like the madness they see on television. You can't allow your children to plug into those iPods and listen to that oral pornography, some people call music. And then wonder why your children are behaving the way that they behave. You must teach them to manage their income, to manage everything that comes into their body, so that they can live up to their potential as human beings and complete our great walk in the sun. This little device here is a little simple toy that someone created that demonstrates the flow of conductive electricity. It's a real simple device. Looks like a ping pong ball. It has inside of it an LED circuit board, a couple of wires, and 2 batteries. And each of the batteries is connected to one of these 2 metal strips. And when I put my fingers on these 2 metal strips, it does what it was designed to do. It literally lights up and it hums. And if I lift up my finger, it stops. So what I'm demonstrating is a concept that you all are already familiar with. You just haven't been taught to internalize it from the proper perspective. You all know the symbol called the caduceus, the symbol of medicine, the 2 snakes intertwined around the staff. They represent this concept, this principle that I'm demonstrating to you right now. The flow of energy through your body. And that you must possess the knowledge in order to manage this flow so that you can be free from illness, free from disease, free from poverty. Because that is the ability, or that is the capacity that we all have. And so energy is literally flowing from one metal strip into my fingers, into the other finger. I complete the circuit and cause this ball to light up and hum. So this electrical energy, so my body is a conduit through which energy flows. And if I know how to manage this energy, I can do some incredible things. If I don't know how to manage this energy and mismanage my life, I can literally create hell on earth. And I want you all to understand that this concept, this reality, affects not just my body, but everybody in the world. All right? So let me ask the 5 of you all to come on up here. First 2 rows, come on up here. I want you to form a circle and hold hands. Just form a circle. Let me get in the circle. How you doing? Good to see you. All right. My brother, I want you to take your index finger and touch this metal strip. Just one finger. Brother, I want you to let go of your right hand. All right, that's okay. See what happened? Hold hands again. All right? So energy is moving from me to her, to him, to him, to him, to him, back to me. Completing the circuit and causing this instrument, this toy, to light up and hum. So what that demonstrates, thank you all. So what that demonstrates is energy flows through every body. I'm just demonstrating an electrical current. But I want you all to understand that thought is energy. What you think affects not just you, but everybody in your environment. How many times you ever told somebody, you make me sick, and then you catch a cold? See, because you don't put thoughts out without the same thoughts coming back to you tenfold.
Right.
So you must learn to be the guardian of your thoughts. Because thoughts are things, and they affect your reality. So as I wind down, I want to share with you the contents of a little bitty book that I read in 1978 that has been my Bible, my guide. And what's interesting is that the contents of this book were used in a song by, of all people, George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. Those of you who still have vinyl, you got the album Standing on the Verge of Getting It On. Came out around 1973. The last cut on side B is a cut called Good Thoughts, Bad Thoughts. It is nothing more than George Clinton taking the words from a book written around the turn of last century called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. One of the most significant books I've ever read in my life, because it lays down a very simple understanding of how your thoughts determine and affect every aspect of your life. I want to share these words with you and just interpret and help you internalize the power in these words. It says, travel like a king, queen. Listen to the inner voice. A higher wisdom is at work for you. Conquering stumbling blocks comes easier when the conqueror is in tune with the infinite. Every ending is a new beginning. Life is an endless unfoldment. Change your mind and you change your relationship to time. Let me repeat that, because that's a simple statement, but it's so profound. Change your mind and you change your relationship to time. How many of you all have ever gotten in trouble because of something that you said? And if you just changed your mind and didn't say that or said it differently, you would have changed your whole relationship to time and space. It says here that you can find the answer. The solution lies within the problem. The answer is in every question. But an attitude is all you need to rise and walk away. So inspire yourself. Your life is yours. It fits you like your skin. Inspire yourself. Check out that word inspire. In spirit. Spirit is a term that represents breath, but it also represents the energy from the Creator, the energy from God. Inspire means to bring the Spirit of God inside of you, which then changes every aspect of your consciousness and allows you to see things that you could have never seen before. Inspire yourself. Your life is yours. It fits you like your skin. The oak sleeps in the acorn. The giant sequoia tree sleeps in its tiny seed. The bird waits in the egg, and God waits for his unfoldment in man.
All right.
Says here that you gravitate to that which you secretly love most. You make in life the exact reproduction of your own thoughts. There is no chance, coincidence, or accident in a universe ruled by law and divine order. Within this context, you rise as high as your dominant aspiration. You descend to the level of your lowest concept of yourself. The infinite intelligence within you knows the answers, and its nature is to respond to your thoughts. So we must be careful of the thought seeds we plant in the garden of our minds, for seeds grow after their kind. Every thought accepted as true or allowed to be accepted as true by your conscious mind takes root in your subconscious mind and blossoms sooner or later into an act and bears its own fruit. Good thoughts bring forth good fruit. Bad thoughts will rot your flesh. Think right and you can fly. For the kingdom of heaven is within. That's the essence of life in a nutshell. Heaven is here. It's not up there. It's not some ways off. It's right here, right now. But if you don't know that, if you've been conditioned to believe that it exists outside of you, and if you are waiting for somebody to bring it to you, you'll be waiting till the day you die. But if you understand with crystal clarity that you have within your person a direct line of communication with the Creator by flowing through your ancestors, you will begin to understand that there is nothing that you cannot do because there is nothing that has not already been done. So with a change of mind, you change your consciousness. So I'll close on this note that the final frontier that we're dealing with, brothers and sisters, is about consciousness. During the period of enslavement, during the Ma'afa, we struggled for our human rights. During the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we struggled for civil rights. And now as we move into and through the 21st century, our struggle is for consciousness. To begin to fully understand what we have always had. And with that understanding, change the world by first changing our mind. You got it in you. You can do it, and as soon as we do it collectively, the world will be ours again. Thank you very much.
Wait a minute. I want everybody up on your feet. Wipe your eyes, get up on your feet, and show the brothers some African love. He brought new meaning to the phrase, the mind of the terrible thing away. Did he not? I don't know about you all, but certain things I'm not going to do anymore. Right? I don't know about you all, but I've been taught this evening. All right? I've been taught like my mama never taught me before. And we want the brother to know, as he travels tonight, he's traveling with the safety of our positive energy. Amen. We at stake because there's so many that's incarcerated would like to be here tonight, sitting where you're sitting. And so that we have to be on the ball, buying tapes. Buy some extra tapes and give them to people who are incarcerated or people in need of hope. Our job as missionaries for the cause of who we are has to be even the more forward in our efforts. And so I'm not going to talk a lot tonight because you had a full talk, and there's another Jeffries to follow. And so I just wanted to greet you and to say keep on keeping on. We are family and we must move in unison in that way. I was just explaining to my little class, one of the students had said, because we were looking at Booker T. Washington today, and one little girl said, well, you know, I don't like Booker T. Washington. I think he was something of an Uncle Tom. I said, no, you have to study Booker T. Washington, because if we had followed what he did and what he was pushing us toward, we would be starting small but becoming big. The way the Asians went into that market a number of years ago when they pushed the Asian out of the fruit market. Remember with John Kennard? They wouldn't allow them because they wanted to get the fruit so they could have these fruit stands. They went in and bought up the supply spot. And thus we saw all of them that operational level, we need every little thing. In spite of what happened to us, I told them about Tulsa. Yes, we were in the move. So all the foreigners coming in, looking down on us because they don't know our history, thinking we're lazy, thinking we're not a part of the enterprising corporate reality or doing the things we ought to be doing. We've had obstacles like no other race or group, and so none of these groups compared to us are to tell us where to do, what to do, and where to go. Every single one, we built this country, and so they stand on our backs, and we must be able to know and tell them in detail, for we are a parent people. God made us that way. And we are to fulfill a responsibility at this point in time, at 2008. What we didn't do in 2007, we do in 2008. Keep your chin up, as Adam Powell said, keep the faith, baby.
Okay, brothers and sisters. We've had two powerful little sisters representing that mother principle lay something on us, but we're going to end with a few words from a brother. Serious brother. And, well, the sisters have it together. We wouldn't be here if the sisters didn't have it together.
Right.
During enslavement, the sisters had it together.
That's true.
Brothers might have been doing some things they shouldn't have been doing. After enslavement, the sisters got it together.
That's right.
That principle of the sisters knowing how to come together has been immortalized by our people,
including Tony Browder.
One of the things I wanted him to do when he came was to bring copies of his latest work, which is Egypt on the Potomac. I'm using it in my class. I'm changing the consciousness of my class by using some of the works that Dr. Browder and Dr. Hilliard, Dr. Wade Nobles, and others have put forth.
Yeah.
On the back of the book, he has the importance of African symbols. Whoever controls the images controls the self-esteem, the self-respect, the self-development. White folks have been able to arrest our consciousness by controlling the images. Knowledge is power. On this imagery here, you'll see the big little white monument. That's the George Washington Monument.
Yeah.
The biggest symbol of its kind in the world. On the other side, you'll find the real deal. The African symbol of rebirth, regeneration, restoration, resurrection. This is a pale copy of our reality. And most of us take our children down to Washington, D.C. Look, Mary Jo and Sammy P. Look at the monument they built for George Washington.
That's true, they say that.
Because we don't have the consciousness to know that that monument is an institutionalization of white supremacy, covering up for the real spiritual truth that African people represent. This symbol is the symbol of resurrection, rebirth, regeneration. This symbol on the surface represents the male fetus, the male reproductive organ. But in its deep thought, and that's what Dr. Correctus, Dr. Hilliard, and all the rest, Dr. Pat Newton, Dr. Francis Coswell, they're telling us all to get into deep thought. This symbol in its deepest thought represents the power of the female mother principle to form a sisterhood, to sustain that sisterhood because they have to nourish the family. They have to help correct the major fatal fault among males, which is jealousy and envy, which leads to hate and self-destruction and death. Our people thousands of years ago institutionalized what is happening to us today on Fulton Street. The destruction from jealousy, envy, and ignorance. Lack of spiritual understanding that we're all spirit. The female has a built-in process of understanding spirit because she brings forth life.
Yes, indeed.
And after life has been brought forth, she nurtures life. And after life has had its footing, then she sustains life. But there's a spiritual consciousness that lets us know that the female also has the power to rebirth and resurrect life. And so when you saw our two sisters follow our brother Tony and our sister McNeil, she don't want me to call her Mother McNeil, Queen Mother McNeil, you'll see that they're making a plea to try to rebirth, resurrect. The brotherhood failed. And this is a symbol of a failed brotherhood. The brotherhood failed, and when you hear Alton speak his heart, he talks about the failure. If he ever gets a chance to talk about Reverend Al Sharpton, he talks about the failure of brotherhood. If you ever hear him talk about the political leadership in this city, he talks about the failure of brotherhood. The brotherhood failed. And it seems to be an eternal condition that we've got to change. And so when we're talking about resurrecting UAM, not for having you have some feel-good sessions here at the Elks Plaza, it's because we've got to strengthen the sisterhood that has been our survival process. And then make sure that the brotherhood is put in place so that you have a serious family based upon the twin pillars of the male and the female process. I got a bald-headed brother sitting in the back. Most of you don't know him. But it was the sisterhood that my mother had with her older sisters, that she bonded with other people that weren't even her sisters, and they were sisters, that she bonded with my father's sisters to produce a village in North New Jersey that of the 100 kids I grew up with, 90 of us made it big. Wow. Because the women put in place the village. So spiritually, we all grew. They put in place the men that protected us. And I was mentioning my brother. My brother and I are an example of the successful brotherhood. Right. My mother wanted to make sure that we didn't have the conflicts and the problems of sibling rivalry, jealousy, and envy. And my brother can tell you some tales, which are true, that his big brother failed in certain instances and didn't realize that Mama had put in place that we are extensions of each other and that we should never fail each other. Mm-hmm. Now, when he raised his boys, he put in place a success process, and his young men have been rivals with each other, but they've never had destruction and death as a part of their process. And my brother couldn't fail to put it in place because my mother had put it in place. He was just following what she had put in place. So that's what we're trying to say. There is a process that we're talking about. We're not talking about entertaining you. There's a process of sacrifice, a process of sharing the responsibility. Alton Maddox is not Jesus. He can't do it himself. Amen. He ain't going to bring no salvation by himself. He's one powerful brother who is standing, and Alton couldn't stand if Viola wasn't under him, around him, over him, and carrying the burden. So you're dealing with the process of strengthening the black family. Jeff, stand up so they can see your bald head. He's not a member of the Bloods, even though he got on ready today. He's got his own African martial arts. And I'm so proud of him because he said, you take care of the world, I'm going to take care of my boys. So he's raised up 2 man-child in Brooklyn. He didn't take them to the suburbs. Raised them on Rogers Avenue, Nostrum, Sterling Place. But instilled in them a fighting spirit. Instilled in them a sense of motivation and achievement. And so now you got a Hakeem Jeffries who is the council, state assemblyman from this area. You got a baby brother who is a professor out in Ohio State who did his PhD on the Lowndes County Freedom Party in Mississippi. Alabama, Mississippi, he went down there and did his studies, his young brother from Brooklyn. But they had the strength, they had the mission, they had the purpose because it was put into the family context. And that's what we're trying to say. These sessions on Wednesday can be very beneficial for us if we're talking about building family. If we're talking about building manhood, if we're talking about building brotherhood, if we're talking about building sisterhood, it can mean something to it. But there's no need to drag Tony Browder from Washington, D.C. and bring him here to tell you what his life experiences has been and how he's arrived at this point where he uses that knowledge to let you know that you are the thing that you've been looking for. But not you as a Negro, you as an African. Not you looking for the external, but you tackling the internal. And the internal is God. Yes. Brother Smalls came up with it. You are God having a human experience. I like that. Because it gives you a sense of purpose and a meaning in your life instead of making a whole lot of money, getting a big house, getting a big car, and then watching the big boys play the game and the system collapse. Obama is the best thing that's happened to us since sliced bread. Yes. Obama is the best thing that's happened to us since sliced bread. Not because he is him. He is the best thing that happened to us because he's thrown the white boy off of his psychic center. The white boy is looking for Ellen Jeffries. The white boy is looking for Alton Maddox. The white boy was looking for Malcolm X. The white boy was looking for Martin King. The white boy was looking for Reverend Sharpton. But the white boy is not prepared to find out what is this thing that has come up out of nowhere.
Right.
So we can expect Obama to put in place a Pan-African formula for our success. We can expect him to put in place a plan to bring our young people out of the prisons and put them on the good foot of Africanness. We can expect him to teach our children in the school system because we should be teaching them at home before we take them in the school system. What Obama has done has thrown the white system in chaos and confusion, and now those of us should have had in place an African plan so we could run it through and he'll be the smoke screen. While he's doing the smoke screen over here, we run the African thing through here and take it all the way through Brooklyn and to every other black community and take it to the Caribbean and straighten up those crazy people in the islands and to Brazil and then go into the continent and say, we're here, mamas, we're taking this shit back. We're going to Africanize your ass. And I'm talking about the Africans on the continent who are in the process of giving away Africa as we speak.
Right. That's why I push this out.
As we speak, they are giving away the continent. And the symbol of giving it away is Nelson Mandela. As great as he was, he did not have a systems analysis, and the white boy has mastered that. And the white boy said, bring Nelson out, give the black people a circus, let them raise their fists in the air, as long as we keep the gold, the diamonds, the platinum, the radium, the titanium, the vanadium, and the wealth of Africa. So let's vote for Barack Obama. Let's raise the banners for Barack Obama. But then let's get busy putting the African plan in place. It's happening. It's our era. I told Tony to bring 30 or so books for my classes. He did. That's in the little white bag there. He slipped me an article he's done on the article on National Geographic. He's already analyzed it and put it on the internet. So I told him I'm preparing something too. I'll give it to him. He said he'll put it on the internet. But what you see here is an example of the consciousness that he's talking about. An example of the brotherhood, sisterhood that I'm talking about. These are images of the pharaohs of the 25th dynasty in the Nile almost 3,000 years ago that came up out of the ground in 2003 to awaken even deeper our consciousness of great leadership. They represented another Wahimi Wasu, which is a repetition of the birth, the rebirth of African greatness. They found them in a ditch in the Kerma ruins that Brother Taki and I had a chance to visit. Put your hands in the air, Taki. Taki led me to the Sudan, to the great ruins of our people there. That's what this is all about. So we went to Tamarka's tomb. We went to Pianki, to Merowe, etc. And what we saw was a reconstitution of the African family for power. That's what this represents. Don't get caught up in a paralysis of analysis. Well, they're not dealing with the truth. And they didn't deal with this. They didn't. The global important thing is that these brothers built images of themselves to represent the power of Africans for eternity. And they were broken up systematically and put in the ground so they would rise up at the right time. 3,000 years later, almost 2003, they rise up to let the black man and black woman know, the black family know, now is your time. And you need to get ready for it. But we having trouble asking y'all to find some money to support your own life and development. Gotta beg you to make the sacrifices. You're only here because of sacrifice. Your grandma sacrificed, your grandfather sacrificed, your great-grandparents sacrificed. You're here because of sacrifice. You're the wealthiest black family in the history of the world is us Negroes in America. The $1 trillion Negro. But because you are the $1 trillion Negro, you can't use your wealth. Because you are the $1 trillion Negro, you can't tap into this knowledge. Because you are the $1 trillion Negro, even if it's put in your face, you don't know how to use it internally for self-development and spiritual development. These are things you've got to learn.
Yes, indeed.
They got to be taught. That's why they built Temple University, spiritual centers, so they can train the leadership. Leadership just doesn't come out of the air. Where does Obama come from? White mother, black father who's absent,
His father died.
Hawaiian education and training. That's why I said his father was absent.
Oh, okay.
His father was absent, so he didn't have a father. And that we think of. Training, the ultimate training out of self, occurred when this brother went all the way up to Harvard, and they recognized his greatness and made him the head of the Harvard Law Review. There are thousands and thousands of white boys who want to go to Harvard, but there ain't but a few of them who could even imagine that they could be the editor of the Harvard Law Review. That's one of the highest positions anybody can attain in America in terms of education.
Wow.
Once he got to that level, he was safe.
Yeah.
There's nothing he would do to upset this system. And somehow or other, he's moving through the world, upsetting the system. I don't think that's his white mama. I don't think that's his ancestors. But when they had a CNN program and they showed his grandmama in Kenya, I said, shit, that's it. That's where it is. That's where it is. This black woman with strength in her face. They went from Nairobi, the big city, on paved roads, then they hit the dirt roads, then they hit no roads, and then they came to her farm. And then they went in the house. She greeted them outside looking strong, took them inside, introduced them to the family. Then came outside, got into her special spot where she sits and chucks the corn. Picked up a machete and started chucking corn while she was talking. Looking serious. And then talked about him as a little boy and how humble he was, etc. Then she took him back inside and then showed him the pictures on the wall of her living room. And I said, there's got to be a little baby picture of him in here somewhere. There was not. But there was a picture of him in the prime of young manhood. He had come back from America and was making a trip to the village of his African family. It was his rites of passage. And you saw this 12-year-old, 13-year-old, light-skinned dude with a big afro and a pack on his back going back. back to Africa. That spirit, that soul is speaking to his black ass. It ain't the right part of his existence. But he has been so educated that that shouldn't even speak to him. Except, if he had had the misfortune of marrying a Chelsea Clinton, or even the Kennedy daughters, there'd be no African manifestation coming out of him, even with the potentiality. But he found himself a black woman, highly melanised, to counteract that lack of melanin. A black woman, not from the islands of the Caribbean, not from Brazil, but from the sea islands of South Carolina. D.T. woman, Georgetown, South Carolina. Now you can't tell me that when that Negro wakes up in the morning and she's still there, and he's looking over her and admiring her, thank you for bringing me back to my Africa. You can't tell me when they have breakfast in the morning that they're thinking about something beside themselves and how they're going to raise these beautiful girls. You can't tell me when he gets beat up during the day and he needs to go back at home to get reconstituted that he ain't looking forward to flopping down with this black woman that he calls what? His rock. My mother was the rock. She was this small. My father was 6'5", but she was the rock. And women are the rock. They're the foundation. And that's what these brothers, when you see them, they're talking about the pharaohs of Nubia. But they had Queen Mother. They had queens that were significant. The Kandesi queens come out of this Nubian dynasty. The power of the women. Now see, this is the knowledge that Tony says is now available to you.
Yes.
But some of y'all want the study group so you can say to your brother, you don't know nothing. And I'm in a study group. In fact, even Dr. Jeffries walked by and waved at us. And we picked up some knowledge just with the wave. And here you are eating pork chops and whatnot. And instead of you developing the consciousness to be able to pick your brother up, dust him off, and help train him, you putting him down. It is the failed brotherhood that has prevented us from taking our place as God's chosen. It is the failed brotherhood in Brazil. It's the failed brotherhood in the Caribbean. It's the failed brotherhood on the African continent. I go to the Caribbean and some dude from St. Kitts tells me he's mad. I said, well, I'm mad too, brother. I'm mad at white folks and what they've done to the world. What you mad at? Well, I'm mad at the people in Nevis. The people in Nevis, what you mad at? Well, I'm better than them. Now here he done picked the fight between two little islands that's supposed to be a nation. Now he done got a fight between them and gonna tell me about the difference. Ain't no difference. These are Africans trying to survive in a system of domination, destruction, and death. Same thing you go to Trinidad. I want to go over to Tobago. Why do you want to go to Tobago? Well, I got friends over there. Well, we got enough here in Trinidad for you to... So you have Trinidadians in a two-island community that includes Tobago, and they can't deal with the Tubagonians. They say the Tubagonians are Bush. We got problems. The failed brotherhood, the envy, the jealousy of the black men was predicted by this universal symbol. And until we can find the formula for making the brotherhood work and then bonding it with the sisterhood and having twin pillars of a true African family, we ain't going nowhere. You can get mesmerized by Tony. You can remember Dr. Beck and Dr. Clark, etc., and what they said, but unless you can put that stuff inside of you to empower you, you ain't going nowhere. Just as these ancestors came up out of the ground 2003 to let you know what state building is, what empire building is. These people was put down as the wretched Kush. And they said, we'll show you how wretched we are. We'll bring our armies up from the south. We'll unify the whole Nile. We'll even go beyond the Nile also to the Tigris, Euphrates. We'll rebuild the temples. We'll enhance the Holy Mount. will raise the consciousness of African peoples that existed thousands of years before us, will raise it anew. That's why you got the Shabaka stone. This is Tahaka, but his son was Shabaka. And we have the Shabaka stone, in which the philosophical understanding of the universe has been carved on a stone. Ancient wisdom that these brothers renewed and brought forth. And that's why when you have Booker Coleman here, we listen to him, he gives us a lecture, but Booker's the one that raised the Shabaka stone and the whole metaphysical understanding of the universe that Africans laid down. They didn't wait for the biblical tradition that emerged from the Jews, and it was carried on by the ancient Christians and carried on by the Greeks and then perverted by the Romans. Did I hear somebody say amen?
Amen.
Philosophical traditions and understanding God is our contribution to the universe. And our contribution is that everything is spiritually connected. And certainly the male and the female principle are spiritually connected. And when they connect, they produce another spirit, which is life. It's not a cursed life. It is God being born again. So we got to understand our deep traditions. And there is an explosion of knowledge. I call it the period of the Great Awakening, 1945 to 1995, and beyond. And that's what Tony was trying to tell you all about. See? That's what Asa was trying to tell you about. He taught us how to live Africa for his 70-something years, and he taught us how to die African. Well, wasn't Asa Gilead in the Boule? So what? The Boule wanted him to join them. He didn't want to join the Boule. They begged him to join them so they could add his power to them. They asked him late in life. The Boule is a brotherhood that has been put in place to keep you crippled. And all of our leadership is involved in it. Reverend Oliver, I hope you're involved, but if you are, I hope you're involved. They wouldn't have an ultimate. They wouldn't have a But 5,000 of our greatest people are in the Boule, including King, including Du Bois, including Samuel Proctor, including Wyatt T. Walker, including all of the congressmen, including Jesse Jackson. They're in a brotherhood of power that's not an African brotherhood concept. It's a concept that complements Skull and Bones. But we can't get into that now. But I'm trying to tell you, you're tapping into something serious when you come up here, up on here with us. And we bring in the Tony Browders. You can't pay for what he gives you. Okay? And we had the pleasure of taking him and his new wife, Janice, to Africa because they wanted to get married in Africa, in one of our villages, where we are queen mothers and chiefs. In Elmina, where it started 500 years ago, 1482, is when the Europeans came and planted a permanent base on African soil to destroy Africa. But Africans are trying to take it back. And when they install a Len Jeffries in the slave dungeon complex, and they install a Rousing Jeffries, that's a part of the taking it back. And then when the Tony Browder said they want to get married, we say get married in our village. And so they had a fantastic ceremony, Janice and Tony, in Africa, in Elmina. So that's what he's talking about, spiritual consciousness. Can you imagine if we put, if one Negro, Obama, can shake the white world? The military people don't know what to do. They say, what is he going to do with the military? He can't change the military. The military is there forever. The CIA said, well, what is he going to do with us? FBI, is he going to take away COINTELPRO? They don't know what the hell is going on. And he is too busy shaking them up to put an African plan in place. You have to put it in place. It has to start with you, with your family, with your community, with your institution. You have to put it in place. So we got a plan. We got a plan for the next meeting, like our sister was saying. And I'm planning for you all too, because we got to put an economic consciousness in place. So Alder's going to have his big activity on the 15th at City College. Yeah, I help support him. On the 14th, that evening Friday, I'm going to have something big at the City College. But that's just going to be to get us moving. You're going to have a plan for the first year. You're going to have a 5-year plan. You're going to have a 10-year plan. You're going to have a 20-year plan. Now, these mothers may be taking this shit back now because they don't put in their 5, 10, and 20-year plans. That's why they take it back Harlem, they take it back Brooklyn, take it back Crown Heights. But if we start putting in an African plan, we can make sure that their plan gets messed up. But you got to plan it. You got to plan it. And you ain't helpless. If one little light-skinned Negro with a white mama can shake up the greatest powers that be, can you imagine if a few thousand of us got this shit together? Some 100,000 got it together? A few million of us got it together? If they even thought you was getting it together, it would shake their asses up. If they even thought about it, the man ain't done nothing. He just said, change we can. What we need to tell them is, change we are. Change we have done. Your system did not say we are free and equal. Your system said we're not even human. The humanity of African peoples was established by the change that our people reached into them inside them and said, we know we're not what they say we are. And they didn't have anything close to what we got. And they were able to make the significant change that allowed us to get here and have a Tony Browder and have an automatics move us. But we got to move together. I'm very positive. You could not be at City College for 35 years like I have if you didn't have African power.
Amen.
If you tapped into African spirituality. If you didn't have a consciousness outside of them. The white boy $1 million education that I have was not designed to service African peoples. It was designed to make me a tool of their system so I could do you in. But my mother put in place the multi-billion-dollar African education that began in the beginning and put that foundation under me and my brother. And same thing happened with most of my friends and family. So that's what it's about. I hope you don't feel impinged upon when the sisters say, you got to make the sacrifice. Alton is about to give up. Alton is about to give up. How much can one person take? Okay? And he knows that the women, however, will resurrect the process of your rebirth with you committing yourself to the process and making the necessary sacrifices. Do you know how wealthy an Alton Maddox could be? You know how comfortable a Leola Maddox, who's very talented, could be? You know how wealthy a Len Jeffries could be? You know how wealthy a Rosin Jeffries could be? A Professor Smalls could be, if that's where we wanted to go? But our thing is to try to continue that struggle of resurrecting Africans, restoring our Africanness. And this is an example of it. 2,700 years ago, the priests said, we're going to cut these statues up and put them in the ground so they can resurrect at the right time. And they came 2003, just when we need to understand, as Dr. Clark said, that we were nation builders, we were philosophers, we were priests and priestesses, mothers and fathers of the universe. Well, look, y'all ain't paying me nothing, so I'm finished.